Greetings, I'm Zachary Hepner, and I'm pleased to share this Dvar Torah for Parashat Balak. Similar to comic books, the Jewish people have arch-enemies. In contrast to a typical bad guy who might want to hurt the protagonist for benefit, an arch-villain wants utter destruction of the protagonist. There are three types of arch-villains. The first villain wants to reach the destination, and the hero, who is in the way, won't budge. This arch-villain wants to destroy the hero because the hero is blocking the path. But the villain doesn't have anything personal against the good guy. The second villain is motivated by a form of jealousy. The hero has something or some things that the villain wants, and the only way to possess it is to dispossess by complete destruction. The final villain is ontologically offended. This true nature of this protagonist is found so offensive that the villain is unable to coexist with such an existentially opposite force. Complete destruction of the protagonist is the only respite the villain can tolerate. From the nascent foundations of the Israelites, they experienced three archenemies who were all intertwined. The first archenemy is found in Sifrei, Deuteronomy, describing Lavan ha'Arami, the Aramean, as one archenemy. As the verse says, Arami oved avi vayered Mitzrayma. During Jacob's tenure in Mesopotamia, his father-in-law, Lavan, bore no hate for Jacob. However, Jacob had the Midas touch. Lavan's estate was blessed and grew to Jacob's labor. Jacob had no legal recourse against Lavan's capricious terms. Realizing at some point that the tables of fortune had been turned, thanks to divine intervention, Lavan's final recourse was to kill Yaakov and seize his dispossessed estate. This is explained in the verse, Habanot benotai, v'habanim banai, v'hadson soni, v'hol asher oter ro'eh lihu. The daughters are mine, the children are mine, and all the flocks are my flocks, and everything you see is mine. The second arch adversary is more subtle, that of Bilam. As Rabbi Menachem Liebtag teaches, that Bilam's intentions in Parashat Balak must be viewed in light of other incriminating evidence. This is called a spoke and wheel conspiracy. Such a conspiracy involves a hub and the spokes. The rim of the wheel connects with evidence that form the spokes. Hired by King Balak as a spiritual henchman, Bilam had Balak sign a consent form that his supernatural powers would have no power over the Israelites. Seemingly innocuous, Rabbi Liebtag teaches that his great sin was his pro bono advice to entice the Israelites to sin and then endure divine punishment. Bilam came from Mesopotamia, the same neck of the woods as Avraham. But Avraham abandoned Mesopotamia to find manifest destiny. Bilam was the greatest prophet alive, or was he? The Israelites were stealing his limelight and hawking his chinik. Bilam would have gleefully destroyed the Israelites. When this comes from outside, it is from the power of Bilam. When such rot comes from within, it is called Mesit Umeidiach, the enticer, in which the Torah says, Lo tachos einecha alav, v'lo tachmol, v'lo tachaseh alav. Do not hearken to him, neither shall thine eye pity him, neither shall spare him, neither shall conceal him, which is also an oblique allusion to one of the key words in Parashat Balak, is open and closed eyes. Bilam is described as the one with open eyes, shetum ha'ayin, and Balak is concerned that the Israelites will cover the eye of the land. Hine am yatzam mitzrayim, hine chisa et ein haaretz, v'hu yoshev memuli. Behold, they cover the face of the earth, and they abide over me. The final archenemy takes Israel personally. Israel is both a people and a symbol. Both must be destroyed, and there is no giving up. This enemy is Amalek, and an eternal enemy it is. Vayomar ki yad al kesya milchama laHashem va'Amalek midor dor. And he said, the hand upon the throne of the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. Any Israelite, anywhere in the world, is sufficiently incompatible with Amalek's Wissenschaft of world order. These three archenemies conflate and collide in the death of Bilam's narrative described by Targum Pseudo Jonathan or Targum Yonatan on Numbers 31:8, on the verse that Bilam was killed in battle by sword. And they slew the kings of the Midianites with the slain of the armies, Evi, Rechem, Sur, who is Balak, and Hur, and Reva, the 5 kings of Midian, and Bilam bar Beor they killed with the sword. And it was when Bilam, the guilty, saw Pinchas, the priest, pursuing him, he made use of his magical arts and flew into the air of the heavens. But Pinchas, forthwith, pronounced the great and holy name, and flew after him, and seized him by his head, and bringing him down, drew the sword, and sought to kill him. But he opened his mouth with words of deprecation, and said to Pinchas, "If you will spare my life, I swear to you all the days I live, I will not curse the people." He answered him and said, "Are you not Lavan the Aramean, who did seek to destroy Yaakov our father, who went down into Mitzrayim to destroy his children, and after they had come out of Mitzrayim, didn't send the wicked Amalek against them? And have thou not been sent to curse them? But after thou hadst seen that thy works did not prosper, that the word of the Lord would not hear thee, that gave evil counsel to Balak, and set his daughters in the way to make them go wrong, where they fell of them 24,000. Therefore it cannot be that thy life may be spared." And at once he drew the sword and slew him. Targum Yonatan is observing the seemingly irrelevant description of Bilam's death by sword and comparing it to Joshua, whose warfare against Amalek was also by sword. Vayachalosh Yehoshua et Amalek ve'et amo lefi charev. And Joshua weakened Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. In contrast to Lavan, who is commanded from speaking good or evil against Jacob. Ve'emesh amar elai lemor hishamar lacha midaber im Yaakov mitov ra. God said, Bilam may not speak against Yaakov good or bad. Yet Bilam against the Israelites utters, Matovu ahalecha Yaakov mishkanotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, Jacob, the dwellings, Israel. Parashat Balak follows the sentencing of Moses and Aaron, who failed to imbue faith to the Israelites, in contrast to Joshua, who weakened Amalek by sword, crediting the faith exerted by Aaron and Hur, Vayhi Yadav Emunah. And Moses and Aaron were criticized, Ya'an lo ha'amantem bi lahakdisheni, because you have not increased emunah to sanctify me. And the irony that Bilam is killed by sword, Amalek by sword, and Lavan is silenced by God. Had Pinchas only considered the spoke of Bilam's failed curses, then Bilam could have been acquitted. But Pinchas realized the spoken hub associated with Bilam as an arch enemy of the Israelites. Only in comic books do protagonists spare their arch enemies. And the irony that Pinchas, the quintessential zealot, is the one to recognize Bilam for who he truly is. Wishing you a Shabbat Shalom.